So in the first three videos, we've talked about why, what, and some ideas on how to implement internationalization at home, internationalization of the curriculum. And we're now going to talk about the some things which can block or support our efforts. Before I do that, I want to talk about the informal curriculum that I've mentioned a couple of times. And I think these are very good ways in which we can use opportunities to work with colleagues to develop international. When I was international dean. Here are some pictures and some examples. So firstly, student mentoring programs. If you have international as well as domestic students, you can use or work with the domestic students and international students as using the domestic students as mentors to welcome them into your institution. And there are many examples of this around the world, but we did this at my university. So that would be informal curriculum, because although it's organised by the university, it's not assessed. If you remember, the difference between formal and informal is whether or not the curriculum is assessed. So another example then, restaurants and accommodation. So here we had people from the university catering service got very involved. They found out about all of the student nationalities that we had at the university, and they put different national food on, depending on the national day or the celebration day for that country that the students came from. And they had the staff wear examples of clothing from different countries when they were celebrating that particular day. And the accommodation service, they had all kinds of events and opportunities within the student accommodation, parties and so on, celebrating different nationalities and customs. So they were also very involved. We had celebrations and events across the whole institution, whether they were, for example, academic with lectures by visiting foreign academics. There might have been cultural activities to do with special. So, for example, you can see at the bottom there a festival for the Chinese New Year. We also had things like seminars about different parts of the world, exhibitions, and so on. And we had various types of festivals, including language, culture, food festivals, film, music festivals, celebrating different national and international contexts. The Students' Union got very engaged. This is the student association, and they had certain programs for international students and for domestic students who wanted to think more internationally. And they organised various clubs and societies. And one of the excellent ones was called a culture club, where different cultures were celebrated. For example, we had a Polish culture club where the students got together and tried to interest people in going to visit their country, to learn more about the food, to practice Polish dancing and so on. And it was a very interesting event. We also had flags from the different countries around the campus, and that can be a very welcoming way of thinking about the international students present on your campus, but also it offers an opportunity for students from the domestic, the home students, to think about an international environment that they're studying in or that they may work in future. So what we were trying to achieve was a campus culture that celebrates and values cultural diversity. And in terms of what we're talking about now, which is what can support or block your efforts, the messages communicated by university leadership or the kinds of services across the institution that I've mentioned here can either block or support any efforts that you're making to internationalize at home. So these are just some examples of what we did. Some barriers may be that lack of institutional support, and conversely, if you have good institutional support, it can be really helpful for you. The skills of academic staff, which I mentioned in section 3, they may be lacking or they may be limited, and so how we actually get over this is a question of staff development, opportunities to work with them, and I'll give some other examples later. The international office may be isolated in its efforts to try and develop internationalisation at home. It may be that there is not particularly good links between the international office and other parts of the university, so there can be a sense of isolation. There may be a lack of financial support. Again, if the institution doesn't see internationalisation as very important, they may not want to put any money into it, and so it's very difficult for you to achieve anything in that kind of context. Cross-university working is really crucial to this, and those examples I've just given about the informal curriculum, working with colleagues from different service areas across the university, working between the international office, the food services, the financial offices, the governance and so on, different parts of the institution, may be quite difficult to get through. We will look at that in more detail in the module on comprehensive internationalisation, by the way, but these are just some of the barriers that you may face in trying to introduce internationalisation at home. So some things that can support you then. There could be a lot of experience in the institution, and some of which you may not be aware of. One thing we did at my university was to do a survey of the staff experience, both academic and support staff, what languages they spoke, which countries they had worked in, or which countries they came from. And that survey helped us to find lots of different supports that we didn't really know existed, people who understood parts of the world and could add their voice to the efforts to develop internationalisation at home. So people from the international office, academics from other countries, or colleagues who've worked in other countries can all be extremely helpful in developing internationalisation at home. But I think it's also important not to underestimate the pressure from students or the pressure from employers. They're all aware that, as we talked about in the first section of this video, the need to internationalise, the need to develop those international and intercultural perspectives and to be prepared for the demands of the world of work. Students are increasingly asking for this, and they want their universities to provide this. So in a way, those kind of demands can help you to influence senior managers if they are not so interested in internationalisation at home. Remembering that we need to support all of our students, not only those who are going to be part of a mobility experience. Some of the tools which can be used to support internationalisation at home. First of all, thinking about from the academic perspective, international reading lists and case studies are an important aspect of this, but obviously they won't do the job in themselves. As we talked about earlier, we need to think about the learning outcomes for the programs. That virtual mobility, which again I talked about in part 3, working with partner universities to offer students who don't travel some opportunity to work with people in other countries through virtual mobility. Guest lecturers, when you have international visitors coming or people from other parts of the university who can talk about different parts of the world and offer international and intercultural perspectives, thinking about opportunities for guest lectures. I've mentioned language learning. This could be as part of the programme of study, or it could be a service that's offered across the institution through the informal curriculum. using flags, as I said earlier, to demonstrate an international mindset across the institution, and also putting up signs in other languages, welcome in many different languages, or directions, or just showing that the institution is an international one rather than a local one, can be very important. Thinking about the local diversity that you may have and using the resources there, different faith groups, maybe community centres, different cultural groups, dance, food, music, art, that they can all be very helpful. If you have refugees or asylum seekers in your country, these can be a really interesting opportunity for students to work in those contexts, as well as talking to local employers who have a diverse workforce. Now, all of these opportunities for students to engage either through their curriculum, through the subject that they're studying, or through the informal curriculum, opportunities for volunteering, for example, in these places, can all be very, very helpful to reinforce internationalization at home. Again, many examples of this, and you'll find some of this in the literature that is listed on the guide for this module. So please have a look at that as well. And here then, the question for this section, from the perspective of your university, your country, your region, what are some of the things which can block or support our efforts? As I say, please also look at the literature and read that and work in your groups to come up with a response to these 4 questions. Here are the 4 questions again. Relating to your university, country or region, why we need internationalization at home, what is meant by it, how it can be implemented, and what are some of the things which can block or support our efforts. Now, as I understand, you have until Thursday to deliver your responses to this, and then I will respond to what you've written. So I look forward to hearing from you, to understanding your perspective on internationalization at home and being able to read how you think it would work in your context. And meanwhile, I will just thank you very much for your attention. And if you're on Twitter, by the way, that's my Twitter handle. And I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.